In 1840, 19 years after his death in captivity on St. Helena, the remains of the Emperor Napoleon were repatriated to Paris. The public funeral created a surge of patriotism. As the years passed, the harsh realities of Napoleon's wars were fading into romantic memory. And so it was that in 1858, a group of veterans of the Grande Armée, who visited Paris on May the 5th each year to commemorate the death of Napoleon, started to think how they might preserve the glories of their youth for future generations. Commercial photography using the daguerreotype and the ambrotype was taking off. Studios had sprung up around Paris. They sold portrait photos to the middle classes to be used as keepsakes. The old soldiers, all now in their 60s or 70s, went to a studio in full uniform and posed. This is Monsieur Maubin, a cavalryman of the 8th Dragoon Regiment. And this is Monsieur Lefebvre, a sergeant in the 2nd Regiment of Engineers. He may well have assisted at Waterloo in the attack on Hougoumont and La Haye-Sainte. Several of the veterans, whose figures weren't what they once were, must have got their tailors to make adjustments to their old dress uniforms. This is Quartermaster Sergeant Delignon, a mounted chasseur of the elite Imperial Guard, Napoleon's shock troops. Monsieur Verland served with the 2nd Lancers. Because of their uniform, they were known as the Red Lancers or Crawfishes. They were a light cavalry unit in the Imperial Guard. Monsieur Dreux also served in the 2nd Light Horse Lancers. At Waterloo, they repeatedly charged the English infantry squares at great loss of life. The veteran corps of the Imperial Guard were the prestigious unit known as the Old Guard. They were known for their loyalty and combat experience. This is Sergeant Tarrier. The Old Guard's towering bearskin hats were recognizable across the battlefield. After Waterloo, British Guards units copied it, and they still use it for ceremonial occasions. Grenadier Berg was also with the Old Guard. Renowned for their courage, discipline, and unwavering loyalty to Napoleon, they were known as the Immortals. Napoleon told them fondly, "You have been my constant companions on the road to honour and glory." At Waterloo, their general is said to have boasted, "The Guard dies, but it does not surrender." The Mamelukes were another unit of the Imperial Guard. These light cavalry troops were created during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. François Dussel served with them from 1813 to 1815. This is Monsieur Dupont, a clerk for the 1st Hussars, a light cavalry unit. Like the other veterans, he boasted on his chest the St. Helene Medal. It was issued the year before to all veterans of the wars of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Empire. Some of the veterans chose to pose in the studio with furniture. This is Monsieur Vitry of the Departmental Guard, the equivalent of today's National Guard in the US. This old veteran appears to have lost his right eye, perhaps in battle. Monsieur Laurier served with the 24th Mounted Chasseurs Regiment. He was a Chevalier of the Legion of Honor. The medal recognized exceptional service to France. Monsieur Schmidt of the 2nd Mounted Chasseurs Regiment of the Imperial Guard. The chasseurs provided personal escort to Napoleon. Schmidt wears a nightcap-style forage hat, normally used for fatigue duties. His original Grande shako had perhaps deteriorated. The blurring on one or two of the photographs suggests the difficulty the old men had in staying still for several seconds while the plates were exposed. This is Monsieur Moret in his grand uniform of the 2nd Regiment of Hussars. The Hussars were light cavalry, known for their characteristic flamboyant uniform. The braided jacket was called a dolman, and worn nonchalantly over one shoulder was a fur-lined pelisse. This is Quartermaster Fabry of the 1st Regiment of Hussars. The Hussars were used as reconnaissance troops and raiders. Although it may actually have originated among the men themselves, Napoleon reportedly said, "A hussar who does not drink is not a hussar. A hussar who does not gamble is not a hussar. And a hussar who does not make love is not a hussar. But he who does all three is the perfect hussar." And this is Monsieur Maire of the 7th Hussars. Maire would have served under the famous cavalry commander Lasselle, known for his flamboyant style, and the quote, "A hussar who is not dead by 30 is a blackguard." Maire would have experienced both the regiment's glory years under Lasalle and the challenging final campaigns that ultimately led to Napoleon's defeat. These are all men born in the 18th century. There are no other equivalent to these amazing historic photographic records. However, in 1880 in London, 5 surviving British veterans of the Waterloo campaign, at their retirement home at the Royal Military Hospital, Chelsea, had their photos taken. Rather than their original uniforms, they wore the traditional outfits of the so-called Chelsea pensioners that dated back to the early 18th century and that are still worn today. By the late 19th century, these Waterloo men, as these veterans were nicknamed, had become local celebrities. Astonishingly, in 1912, the last remaining Russian veteran of the Napoleonic Wars was photographed. It was claimed he was 114 years old.